I'm Conor Sheridan, founder and CEO of Nory, and welcome to What's Cooking. As operators, we talk a lot about operational excellence, but what does that really mean in practice? And what's the cost of not defining it clearly? There's a myth that improving ops is just about tools or training, but Jonny Bramwell's journey at Rosa's Thai shows that real transformation is never plug and play. He's leading Rosa's Done Right, an ongoing transformation project aimed at raising the bar for operational excellence across Rosa's Thai. But here's what makes it different. It's not just about systems, it's about culture, clarity, and making high standards second nature to everyone on the front line. In this episode, we get into the trade-offs, the leadership lessons, and the momentum it takes to really drive change at scale. Let's get into it. Jonny, welcome
Hello.
to What's Cooking. Thanks a million for joining. Looking forward to speaking to you. Today we're going to talk a little bit about operational excellence, how you've been navigating it in Rosa's Thai, some of the initiatives that you're leading and the outcomes it's had in the business. Before we get started, are you happy to give us a quick intro onto your background and your journey to your current role?
Absolutely, and pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. So yeah, I'm Jonny. I've been with Rosa's Thai just over a year and a half. So I look after operations for the outside of London cohort of Rosa's Thai. Long story short, journey starting in bars, pubs, straight out of school really, and then yeah, pub after pub, fast casual dining, gastropub, restaurants, other forms of restaurants, COVID bars. Rosa's Thai. So, yeah, it's an eclectic journey, a big mix. But in terms of where we are now, restaurants, food, it's far more of a passion now than maybe beer was when I was younger. So, great place to be.
Yeah, nice. Nice to see the role ages as you do, right?
Yeah,
The
exactly.
tastes change, get a bit healthier maybe,
Yeah,
potentially. Yeah,
yeah.
nice. Very cool. So a year and a half in, we were chatting outside and you mentioned you're leading Rosa's Done Right, which is like a big initiative or a big transformation initiative for the business around really driving operational excellence. I know a lot of operators talk about that. That phrase is bandied around everywhere. To actually improve the operational efficiency of a business is very difficult. So super keen to hear about what is that initiative? What was the driving force behind setting it up and how's it going?
Yeah, I mean, it's good to put a name to it because I particularly with my team spoke about operational excellence quite a bit when I first joined Roses, and you can put that title on it, but what does that really mean? It's about making sure everything works together. So all the support office functions, everything that goes to site level, everything that in contact with the guest, that is operational excellence. But we had to put a name to it. So actually, the Rosa's Done Right project, that title was formed, conceived before I joined Roses.
Okay.
But in terms of its sort of landing, we came up with a book, which was how do we want everything to look and feel in a restaurant? And the reason why that came about is as Roses has grown, we opened site 1 17 years ago now. Have grown pretty significantly, 46 restaurants now around the UK. And as we have grown, everything that's changed in the world, the inconsistencies have kind of landed throughout as we've gone through. So, you would have everything from a guest visiting one restaurant to saying, I had a great experience here, but it wasn't what I had here. Oh, I didn't know you had a Rosa's here. It's not like it is in London. Or, oh, I had a great experience here. It's so different to London. Didn't realize you were part of a brand. So we were quickly aware that we had to drive that consistency. And that wasn't just guest level, that was actually team level. You'd have a member of team management cover another restaurant and be like, oh, Waterloo does it this way. You'd be like, okay, interesting. Or, Birmingham do it this way. And so we were aware that the issues we were finding with a guest were right back to the operational function, which is what do our teams do in the day, to make sure our Rosas set up right, giving the same experience to the guest. And as we started to chew through the project, we realized there was so much being done differently in a beautiful way. We have this saying within our group called beautiful chaos, which is very much a part of our heritage and origin as a Thai restaurant brand, right back to our founder Saipin. And having that, you go and experience a restaurant experience in Thailand, it is chaotic. It's all over the place, and we wanted to capture the best bits of that and try and which is the ops way of doing things, make that consistent. Easier said than done.
46 sites, complexity, individual nuances for each one, beautiful chaos, make it consistent. Sounds like a big project or a big piece of work. So fair play for undertaking it. Oftentimes in transformations, there's a big tension, right, between where you're at versus where you want to be. From speaking to you, you seem like you're very outcome driven and you're high performance driven and ambitious guy. So, like, how did you navigate that even personally to say, here's where the business is, here's where I'd like it to be, and oftentimes there's a tension between that gap. Like, and how did you decide where to start? Did you go after every single issue that you saw, or did you go, okay, sequentially, maybe these parts of the business should be focused on first?
Yeah, we were aware it was a pretty significant undertaking because of, not just the geography of where I'm Rosa's. We're up in Edinburgh, Glasgow, we're down in Exeter, we're in London. We were aware that in terms of getting everyone on board and making that change within a certain period of time, we wanted to use this year to really land it and embed it. Time was kind of the main limitation, but also, managing the expectation of what our really top performing managers and teams thought was right. So you'd I use my team up in Birmingham as a really good example. Beautiful restaurant, GM there, very, very proud of his business, really represents itself well. You walk up to it, it's a beautiful looking business. But, you'd have to look him in the eye and say, oh, you've got flowers on the table, is that Rosa's done right? And he'd be like, well, no, but it looks good, but it's not done right. It's not that consistency we need in all our restaurants, because that's not what we're trying to achieve at the moment. We're trying to achieve consistency so that the guest walks in, sees and feels the same thing throughout. And so you're having conversations with managers and saying, I'm not trying to make it worse for you, or make your business look worse, but you need a good starting place that's consistent. So a few challenging conversations at the start, but what we realized as we went through is that to embed this change, I think what you do with any operational change is it's got to be bottom up. You've got to have your site teams lead and tell you what's achievable. I get ops, so I've run businesses. The GMs are in it every day with their team, with the guests. They get it. So we kind of, with the limitations of the time we had, realized we kind of had 2 12-week cycles to get this program launched and landed within the restaurants.
Wow.
So time's kind of the other limitation.
It's very tight, yeah.
Very tight. Because now we're in summer, Christmas is on the way, we've got a new menu to roll out. We didn't really want this landing of the program to interfere with those pretty key other projects that the teams need to focus on. So we did our first 12-week rollout with champions, which were restaurants which self-identified as being, I think I run a really good Rosa's Thai. I think the standards are great here. We agreed, looked at our guest sentiment, we looked at the team turnover. We went, yes, they are running clearly a very good restaurant. And we tested, with our little sort of guinea pig cohort of 8 restaurants. And that was an incredibly important exercise, in terms of finding out where our team's ability was. We had a lot of restaurants within that cohort that had team members who've been with Rosa's for 10, 15 years,
Wow.
who were part of when we were an independent business, have gone through that scale and growth through private equity investment, and have seen Rosa's grow, but haven't seen, maybe the experience that I've had in my career, which is, starting off with a small independent, moving to a family business, joining a behemoth like Green King. I've managed to take sort of the independent bits and adapt it to a big brand, and then what have you throughout. They've just known Rosa's, so we were making fundamental changes to their way of working, to their knowledge, understanding, trying to change years of ingrained learning. That was a key learning, that was, a big level of resistance that we found. It's like, which is the right thing, which is, we're not just saying we got to change things, we got to retrain, we've got to completely change the mindset. Yeah. In terms of feedback from the GMs, plentiful.
I can imagine. Yeah, well, like, effectively everything lives and dies in the front line.
Correct.
They're running the restaurants, they're running the P&L, the guest experience. So have that day-to-day, plus trying to maybe, I think you use the analogy outside of building the plane while you're flying it. That's challenging when you're in a restaurant setting. That's really interesting with the cohort. So you chose 8 restaurants who self-identified, which is super cool. I'm glad that they made it in after self-identifying. That would have been maybe an awkward one. Did you see inconsistencies across those restaurants?
Absolutely.
Or really, yeah?
Absolutely. Yeah. And then, we had 4 from London, and 4 from the region. Some were quite well established within the region. Some were sort of newer openings, sort of last year cohort or the year previous. So we had different levels of maturity sort of within the business in terms of what they thought was normal. And yeah, we found quite significant differences between a lot of them. And we, as part of the exercise we went through the program, we had them go to each other's restaurant, and we came up with a sort of, which is, I'm sure we'll talk about later. We kind of gave a grading system on, how does the restaurant feel? Does it feel like a good Rosa's? Is everything that we've spoken about through everything from steps of service to some of the key principles we've tried to land in terms of shift setup and checklisting and guest engagement. Are they being done right? And they went to the other restaurants and said, oh, they do that there, and that is exactly what we've been speaking about, but they do it so much better. And then you see it go to their restaurant, and then you see it go to their restaurant, and then you'd suddenly see all those differences start to connect, purely just because you've got a team that feels like they are fundamentally changing the business, which they are. They've made it so much better, in terms of the guest experience and how the team feels, and just a site visit changes that.
Super interesting, right? To get people engaged from the start gets that momentum behind such a big project. When you went to that cohort, did you have a really well-defined view of what done right looked like or great looked like, and then you iterated, or was it like embryonic 12 weeks where you're iterating on the feedback from the core groups, and then by the end of that did it look the same, I suppose, at the end of the 12 weeks as it did at the start of the 12 weeks?
Absolutely not. No, absolutely not. No. So the original sort of principle of Rosa's Done Right was, here is a book. And it's not like running a restaurant for dummies, but here's a book, 40-page book, which is, if you go into a Rosa's Thai, everything should look kind of like this. So your till station should be tidy. Your brief sheet should look like this. Your uniform should look like this. What it became was far more about real guest engagement experience. And actually the whole program evolved into getting much deeper into forecast accuracy and deployment, and making sure we had the right team on the right place to set the shifts up to succeed, and make sure the outside, which we know is a really big draw for passing trade, was really well set up. And it became something much, much, much bigger. And I suppose what was really good as we came out of that champion program, which was originally 12 weeks, we had a pretty frank feedback wash-up session afterwards, and made the wider rollout the 14-week session, because we realized there's a few more weeks we had to sort of add in to really land some of the more advanced training that we needed to do. We did a regional retreat, and we had the champions come up and speak about their restaurants and the journey and what they did, and the results, the performance that's come out of it, in terms of everything in terms of ops metric changed for the positive. Team turnover, guest sentiment, audit scores, the lot became positive. There was not one restaurant that didn't say they were in a better position afterwards.
Incredible.
It is, and you got 8 people in a line, and it was beautiful and almost emotional to sort of hear them talk with such joy about their businesses in front of a room of GMs and support office, because everyone was locked into it. And that's the right way to do any level of ops. It's never a top down, we need to do this. I very much believe, and I think the best successes I've had come from the restaurants. They know their businesses. They say what they need to do, and this is a prime example of that.
Yeah, I can imagine you can have a huge amount of pride amongst your peers to be able to show everything is moving up to the right after, and then for you as an operator, there's no better scenario than that to try and get engagement for the next cohort.
Correct.
You talked a little bit on resistance at the very start. Obviously, teams are busy. They have the full-time job. They have now the project as a core part of the job too. What was some of the challenges you experienced early on, or some of the resistance that you had to overcome?
I'm a big believer in giving time back to a restaurant. I think if there's anything you can give a GM, their assistant manager, head chef, it's time. The gift of time. There is so much to do in a business. New legislation keeps coming in that adds more hurdles to jump through. The greater the amount of time we can give our restaurant leaders with the guest and their team, that's what we've got to do. So to land something like this, where we're now saying you spend more time doing something, not ideal, right? So that was a big resistance, and we've got a fantastic restaurant up in Edinburgh, which is currently going to the Fringe Festival and hitting record sales. We are
Shout out Edinburgh.
Yeah, shout out Edinburgh. Woo! Go team. We had Danny, GM there, who very switched on, very engaged, very much a sort of a trainer. He gave back a full list through the sort of the champion program of what wasn't working, and it was very frank, very honest, but incredibly well written, in the case of this isn't working, problem, solution, and there's real insight that we had, like, oh, okay, well, that's great, let's change it. And we just changed our approach. We were just asking teams to do too much and maybe not putting enough trust in them to say, look, we're running our business, we know what you expect of us, don't force feed it. So we basically put the guardrails down, but we put them on the train rather than them sort of finding their own way to go down it.
It's huge empowerment in that. It's their business, they own it. They can own the outcome then, the results that you mentioned.
Yeah, massively. And we had a call, we sort of did weekly interventions with our champions, and we said, hi guys, look, we've listened, we've had this feedback, we're going to change it. And all of them just went, oh yeah, great, cool. So it wasn't like everybody was doing these feedback sessions for nothing to happen. They immediately saw like they were driving the change. They were part of saying, we know what you expect us to do, but this is quite restrictive. Let's just trust us to do it. And that's the right approach.
Yeah, definitely. Never seen a big project land without that. So you went from 8 to 46. Did the initial cohort of 8, were they engaged in helping like train the trainer or helping deploy the Rosa's Done Right in the next cohort? Or was it, what did that look like when you had to go network wide? Was there similar challenges?
Yeah, very much so. So we had them visit so we had within our sort of regional setup, we have area managers sit within it. So each champion was within each area within our restaurant group. So we had them with the area managers lead the conversation. We had them supporting doing shadow shifts. So sort of assessing the business, how did it look, feel, was everything being delivered right? I mean, there's way more to it. It's like a 40 question sort of sheet that gives you a number at the end of it. But they were actively involved in that. And, the restaurant teams were really happy to see them come in because they weren't just grading a restaurant. They weren't sort of some sort of teacher. They were a peer. They were coaching. They were guiding. They were advising. And that was, again, wonderful. And I think it's testament to the culture we got in Rosa's, where everyone is so accepting to feedback to drive positive change that, it wasn't perceived as, well, you didn't come into business to tell me what to do. It's, oh, you're coming to our business, and that's really insightful. Thank you.
No defensiveness, right?
Correct. There's not really much room for that within us anyway. We're still very much found very actively involved in the business. Our culture, our values are very obviously driven from that family food culture of Thailand, and our site teams really exhibit that. And that was a cultural shift and change that the team fed into 4 or 5 years ago, coming out of COVID. They created the values, and that's proof alone of that sort of bottom up landing. And the same thing here, they are driving and telling us what a good Rosa's Thai is like. And we're taking all the best of it, and we've got it in one format, and now it's group wide. It's so beautiful.
How long has it been live across the whole group?
We completed last week.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Huge milestone.
Huge milestone, yeah. So out of, sort of the book being created, which is about this time last year, I think that was finalized, to our launch meeting within our ops team. I think that was October last year, to deciding how we were going to launch it, deciding how we we're going to land it, a couple of retreats, the 12-week champion program, the 14-week rollout program, and any number of crazy weekly dial-in sessions throughout, and meetings and training courses. We reached completion last week. Now, I wouldn't say we're fully complete. I think in terms of what we now call Rosa's Done Right, what we've done is we've created the language for everything. So you can walk in very easy and go, is that Rosa's Done Right? And everyone knows what we're talking about now. We're not saying, is that till station set up right? Is that bar set up correctly? Are those products supposed to be there? Why is this not on? We're saying very simply, is this Rosa's Done Right? Prompting people to question their businesses. And we've just got words for everything. We have a superb GM in Ealing, Daniela, and she said, like, the most amazing thing is my team all knows the language now. They speak about 4 or 5 different things on a shift. Everyone knows what they're talking about. So there's no misunderstanding or misconception. It's really clear what everyone's talking about. And that's what we talk about now. And it's something we'll always revisit. We won't just say, right, Rosa's Done Right's good, we've launched it, landed it, done right, great. It's something we'll keep revisiting.
Huge power in that alignment. Everyone's on the same page.
Correct.
Everyone knows the patterns. So you talked a bit on success metrics earlier. You mentioned things like guest advocacy or sentiment, operational standards, even things down to like productivity and forecast accuracy. And the first cohort, obviously, really positive signals. Can you talk to us a bit about what success looks like now for the program? Like, are you hoping that everybody hits those metrics, and what kind of things are you looking at to know whether Roses is done right or not done right?
Yeah, great question. I think we have seen very, very meaningful movement in our guest sentiment, our advocacy, particularly within sort of the keywords of things like cleanliness and atmosphere. We've seen quite significant growth in those areas, because there's just such a finer attention to detail, particularly within the new openings we did this year, Reading and Cheltenham. We did Roses Done Right and landed them, opened them through the process, and they have opened with unbelievable performance scores. So Reading is probably one of our flagship sites. It's one of our highest contributors in terms of performance financially. Cheltenham, we've opened with the lowest team turnover of any opening we've done. We've still got 80% of the team from opening. So we've got two very instant results of things we did throughout the program that have landed it. But as at a macro level, we've never been better in terms of guest sentiment and team turnover, which are the real bedrock of growth. That allows you to kick off and go, right, we're in a really strong place to kind of do whatever we need to do now. And in terms of sort of the Asian dining category, we're industry leading at the moment in the last 5 to 6 weeks in guest sentiment, and that's where we want to stay. We want to be there. It is huge, and it's a very competitive market. There's some incredible operators out there, and that's where we want to be. We want to be seen as an incredible operator too.
From listening to you, it feels like I've seen operational initiatives in other restaurants. I've been part of them myself, trying to drive excellence in bar raising. You've continuously gone back to guest sentiment and team turnover, which is effectively team stability and engagement. And you've not touched on like P&L metrics. You've not touched on operational audits. Obviously, they're part of it, right? But the fact that you're so focused on those two pieces, is that just part of the culture? Like they're the two key metrics for the business, and if they're going well, everything else should work itself out? Or how did you land on those two pieces? Because lots of ops directors or lots of people who are running ops are really focused on the P&L, and the rest of those metrics sometimes come secondary.
I mean, ultimately, that's that's what we're here as ops to do, right? Is to hit that bottom line. Unfortunately, the route to that is never as simple as let's take some sales and let's make sure the costs are okay, and there we go. There's a pretty famous book which is called The Score Takes Care of Itself, and it's about making sure the teams are really engaged and drilled and know what's expected of them, and then the score line of the match will look after itself, in very brief terms. And I think that's the only way to look at a hospitality business. No one gets into hospitality to look at spreadsheets and P&Ls. My first bar job, I fell into it, and loved it, and loved being around people and serving a good product and getting a bit nerdy about beer, and then really enjoyed management, when I was invested in well by one of my first bosses, and that taught me that investing in people is really important. That's always been my sort of go-to through life. It's that coaching and developing. And you've never really seen a business with a bad P&L with an engaged, trained team delivering a great guest experience. And
100%.
that's the key thing. Very rarely, bar something that's really out of your control, do you see a bad P&L from those businesses. We talk about it a lot because it's the stuff we can action. We can make sure our teams are stable and well drilled and engaged and care about the business that they work in. We can look after the guest, and make sure they're having a great time and getting a great product, because we can control that. You can't really control other factors around that in the P&L. So obviously my FD would probably say differently, but those are the main things that drive the business success. Drive that top line and make sure that we're acquiring cover growth and making sure that everything converts down well.
Nice. At 10 years, like 10 to 15 years, you're doing something right? That's pretty remarkable for hospitality business to have people there long. So you mentioned 2 new openings this year, really good metrics from Roses Done Right, good early signal. So is this fundamentally going to change your rollout plans, your implementation plans for new venues? Do you start with that, or what's that going to look like?
Yeah, so we kind of to a degree landed it in Reading and Cheltenham, which we opened at the start of the year. We've got a number of sort of openings in the pipeline next year. So in terms of our new store opening program next year, that will be heavily in there. So our managers coming on board, whether they're internal promotions or whether they're an external candidate coming in, they will be put through that Rosa Done Right program. We have an incredible training team that, when we get into a new opening, is unbelievably good at driving that Rosa's culture in. And adding this in is just going to give them so many more tools to just making that Rosa's open superbly. Also, through the program we've just done, through the champion program and then through the wider rollout, we've now got about 300 pages in terms of slide decks of like training material,
Wow.
experiences, testimonials that can talk to that. So if there's any bits within an opening that we think actually that's going to be really relevant to making sure we open a restaurant well, we'll take that. Our people team, our head of L&D, Tom, with his training manager, Tommy, they have built some unbelievably engaging content, short form videos, training videos on steps of service, on guest engagement. And I'm probably underselling it, but I think they put together about 4 or 5 training courses through the program that we had to build. And they will be so useful for when it comes to doing an opening because, previously relied on, a team coming in from other restaurants and going, no, that's not how we do it. No, you need to do that differently. Now it's all there. We've got the content to be able to demonstrate that.
It's always that ramp up, which is the hairiest part of a new restaurant, right? You don't know if everyone's going to get super consistent experience. The way the reviewers always say, I'll wait 3 months or 6 months to review a new venue because you're figuring it out. But if you have like that level of content, materials, engagement, you'd imagine your ramp up's going to be super quick, right?
Yeah, exactly. And new openings now are less forgiving than they were before. Everyone is, because you want to drive volume and drive hype, you need to really hit the ground running. There's not really an ability to slowly creep up and sort of sneak in. You've got to go with a bang. So, you've got to be performing right off the bat. Yeah, so really crucial.
So you mentioned obviously we have all of these materials for Rosa's Done Right, for guest experience, for operational standards. Does that apply across the different channels of the business, like for delivery, pickup, or any of these things, or is it specifically orientated around in store?
That's our next project. Really, we've got 2 sort of projects off the back of it, knowing that how successful this, I wouldn't say dining approach is, but restaurant approach is. We are fundamentally a restaurant business. We have a very strong delivery arm, and a relationship with our delivery platform partner is really important. And that delivery arm of the business really makes our productivity quite substantial. But we're a restaurant business, so we have to get that bit right first, which is that beautiful chaos, that incredible energy our teams give, the best examples of it. We need to give our guests that experience because Rosa's product is unbelievably good. Like, it's just, the product is everything. But guests don't just come for the product. They can order a product on delivery and, it'll be lovely and delicious. And they'll go, oh, okay. But actually, I know it's going to be better if I try it in a restaurant. And they need to come to the restaurant and have a much better experience than that delivery and takeaway. And that's the crucial bit that we know we had to land first, because getting the restaurant experience 6-star is the first step. And there's other bits we're going to work on now. We're doing some new menu work project, and then there's Christmas, so there's a bit to go in that. But sort of burning away in the background is kickstarting a process and sort of Rosa's Done Right with more back of house tune, in terms of kitchen setup, equipment, layouts. We've already got all the sort of specs to it, but actually it needs to now match everything we've done front of house, or rather restaurant ops, if you will, and then delivery done right, which is, there's a lot more work in that for much more expert minds than mine.
Nice, nice. When you're mentioning beautiful chaos, I'm picturing so many different scenarios in my head, like in terms of what that would be like from a guest point of view. Do you have any examples of what that means for Roses?
The incredible thing about our Rosa's Thai teams is that they can be and have been so used to running quite tight in some big busy shifts, and it's, as much as you can forecast as accurate as possible, sometimes you'll just be twice as busy as you expect. And that is where that chaos comes out. You have 2 people running a floor that has 70 guests in it, and they are running the business. And that's where that chaos comes out. It feels really disjointed and chaotic. And, oh, here I have a side plate. I know, here I have that. Oh yeah, I'll get you that. And it adds to the experience. That it's something that is not necessarily easily taught. And we have tried to sort of structure that as much as operationally you can, in terms of make sure you give side plates down before the guest gets it. But also, it's okay to forget and then be like, oh, no, here you go. And that's kind of in there, it's in time to give that structure to that chaos. And then, when our teams make mistakes, which, they do, they are so engaged in fixing it, and that creates that chaos. It's almost, it's impossible to sort of train in, but we need the restaurants and the businesses to be set up and give our teams an expectation that it is okay to be a bit more proactive, make mistakes, account for your mistakes, spend a bit more time with the guest. And really, through Rosa's Done Right, we spoke earlier about looking at, as we went through, about forecast accuracy and deployment, making sure it's right. We've been saying to some of our teams that have been running tight, for a significant period of time, put someone extra on, and you've got more time with your guest, so spend more time with the guest. And what came from that is, I don't really know what to do with myself now. I can now talk to the guests. I'm not running around. I'm not chasing my own tail. I'm not, oh my God, I've forgotten this. Oh, I've done that. Oh, that's wrong. They've got more time. And that personality, that chaos that would be physical is now conversational. You have to talk to the guests more about the brand, the product, the provenance. Our food still comes from Thailand, from the family business right at the start. It still comes from there. And our teams have time to talk about it now. And then, so that chaos is a bit more refined. But, it means that when things do run tight, it still feels good as a guest most of the time.
I like that. It can deliver really good energy, right? You can see it's like the orchestra moving around in perfect sequence at high energy, which is nice from a guest point of view as well. You feel like people are proactive, which is
feels
cool.
like the experience of if you go to your in-laws for Christmas, and it's all a bit chaotic and everyone's sweating. Oh, I burnt the turkey.
Delivered with love and passion, though.
But it feels a memory. That's a memory that you always have, and that's what we want people to leave from. Casual dining can be, if you want it to be, monochrome and boring and fills a price category. But there's no such thing as sort of value casual dining anymore. Casual dining in the modern climate is expensive. Having a meal out is a treat, and you need it to feel experiential. It needs to fill a memory, and the best memories made are not just the food that's eaten, but everything that's around you. And if you've got a story to tell afterwards that is fun and enjoyable, that's going to sit in the memory a lot longer.
Yeah, and travels a lot further.
Correct.
To the peer group. Well, look, thanks so much for that. Sounds like a really nice initiative, and excited to see the fruits of that over the next couple of sites. We're going to move on to the quick turn. So the next one is a couple of rapid fire questions. Rapid fire isn't one word answer, but it's maybe
shorter
than 30 seconds to a minute, right? And it's to get an understanding of how you think about different parts of the business. So what's one process that you've automated that you wish you'd done sooner?
We consolidated all of our performance data daily into one accessible place. So we basically got a dashboard that we built, and we just got it all there in the mornings, ready to go.
Really nice.
Beautiful.
Saves a bunch of time.
Just tells you what to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really like that. What's one metric that you obsess over from that dashboard, maybe?
Depends on the day of the week, but cover growth and team turnover.
Nice. And would you look at them weekly?
Hourly.
Very cool. You're on top of it, right?
Yeah, well.
You're on it. What's one system or piece of technology that you think is underrated in the business today?
I'm yet to see one that does it all yet perfectly, but anything that can automate stock and ordering processes. So, yet to see the right one.
Time. Soon.
Soon.
So basically, on the back of the last piece around Rosa's Done Right, how do you know when to rip up a playbook and start again and try to recreate something?
I think when you're working in a project and the team you're working in, wherever they're from, it's when you spend more time justifying something you've got to do rather than giving an insight or a solution. I think if you need to spend that time justifying something more than you actually believe it, then give up, start again, get a night's sleep, rethink it.
Yeah, we talk about that internally as well. You spend more time talking about the thing than doing the thing, and talking about it becomes the thing. What's the best piece of leadership advice or operational advice you've ever been given?
When I used to work for Green King, my ops director, Mark, who sadly he passed away earlier this year, he said to me, whatever you do in terms of decision making, don't ever let your values be questioned or disintegrated. And that's very meaningful. very meaningful.
Yeah. And the last one, what is one operational best practice, air quotes, that you see across the different organizations in your career that you would challenge?
This is difficult given everything we just spoken about earlier, but I'm sure steps of service as a best practice could probably be torn up and we could talk about something differently again. I think as operators, you want to make everything the same. You want to make it consistent. You want to make it best practice, but really the best hospitality is everything we've been speaking about. That chaotic energy that goes with it, that Basil Fawlty-esque experience that gives you that memory. Steps of service are a best practice. They're there for a reason so that every guest gets a box ticked. But actually, is it the best way to give a guest experience? Don't know. There's probably some brighter minds than mine who can work that out.
Yeah, it's something I've even spoken about previously. It's different types of guests want a different type of experience. Different types of people will deliver different types of experience. And it's very hard to have one sequence of service that can actually meet all of those needs, right? It's nuances. Well, Jonny, look, thanks so much. Really learned a lot from that. And I think a lot of operators will have learned a lot from how you've deployed such a big change at scale and obviously massively successfully too. So excited to see the business go from 46 to as many as you can take it in the next couple of years. And yeah, look, thanks so much for your time. It was great having you on What's Cooking.
Thank you.
That's it for this week's episode of What's Cooking. A huge thanks to Jonny for joining. And I learned a crazy amount today. To be able to deploy a project of that level of complexity of Rosa's done right across 46 restaurants all over the UK is incredible. Jonny and his team nailed it. He really called out why that happened. Buy-in from the front line, iterating on feedback from your team, making sure that they feel a sense of ownership, not just over the project, but the outcomes of the project itself. He talked about the metrics that define success for a project at that scale, guest sentiment, and your people. That's it. There's a recurring theme in these episodes of What's Cooking. It's not only about the P&L. It's about how do you make your guests feel? Are your teams mission driven? Are they buying into what you're trying to achieve in the business? If the answer is yes, everything else works out. Jonny used a really nice reference to a book going, what's the score? If you have a team that's aligned and knows what to focus on and is bought in, the score will take care of itself. If you took something from Jonny's story, please share it with a fellow operator. And if you're not following us already, now's the time. See you next time.